Europe and the People Without History by Eric Wolf. This book critically examines Eurocentrism, colonialism, and cultural interactions, challenging traditional historical narratives to provide a broader understanding of the global interconnectedness and dynamics between Europe and non-European societies. In Chapter 1, Eric Wolf introduced the readers the three-stage model of historical development. This model categorizes societies into three distinct stages based on their modes of production. The first stage is called king order societies. This stage refers to societies organized primarily around kingship ties and communal relationships. Economic production is often based on hunting, gathering, and social hierarchies are relatively egalitarian. Such societies typically exhibit a strong sense of communal ownership and reciprocity. The second stage is called tributary societies. These are societies that evolve into more complex political structures with centralized authority and hierarchical social arrangements. Economic production is often based on tribute or taxation systems. This stage involves the emergence of states and empires where political power is concentrated in the hands of a ruling class. And the third stage is called capitalist societies. The third stage represents societies organized around a capitalist mode of production. Economic relationships are primarily governed by market forces, and social hierarchies are shaped by economic inequalities. Now, by contextualizing European societies within this framework, Eric Wolf calls for a more inclusive and interconnected approach to studying world history. In the next chapter, Wolf delves into the concept of Europe and its construction as a distinct entity, while exploring the dynamics of otherness in relation to non-European societies. Firstly, in this chapter, Wolf critiques Eurocentrism, which is the tendency to view European culture, history, and values as superior or central to the rest of the world. He argues that Eurocentrism has shaped historical narratives, leading to the marginalization or neglect of non-European societies in the study of global history. There is an emphasis that Europe is not a fixed and homogeneous entity, but a construct that has been shaped by historical processes, power dynamics, and cultural exchanges. The concept of otherness, which refers to the construction of non-European societies as fundamentally different and inferior to European societies. Wolf examines how this dictamony has been perpetrated through colonial encounters, racial hierarchies, and the construction of primitive or savage others in European discourse. Now, by challenging Eurocentric perspectives and exploring the dynamics of otherness, Wolf aims to deconstruct the notion of a singular European identity and emphasizes the need for a more inclusive and interconnected understanding of global history. Now, in Chapter 3, the author begins exploring the historical development of Europe's periphery, focusing on regions such as Ireland, Scotland, and the Mediterranean. He argues that studying peripheral regions is essential for comprehending the complex processes of historical change and interconnectedness of societies. Eric Wolf emphasizes that peripheral regions have often played a significant role in shaping European history. For example, the Mediterranean region served as a hub of cultural exchange, trade, and intellectual development, influencing European societies through the transmission of knowledge and ideas. Now, in the next chapter, we're looking at the historical expansion of Europe beyond its borders. And this chapter discusses the expansionist strategies employed by European powers, such as the establishment of colonies, the formation of trading empires, and the use of military force. What this chapter also discusses is the consequences of European expansion, including the spread of diseases, displacement of indigenous populations, and the establishment of racially hierarchical structures. Wolf underscores the lasting effects of colonialism in both European and non-European societies, shaping the trajectory of world history and contributing to global inequalities. Now, following, colonialism is brought up in the chapter. This is a central focus of this novel. This chapter offers a critical examination of the relationships between European centers and non-European peripheries during the era of colonialism. Wolff examines how European centers exerted control over non-European peripheries through various mechanisms. He discusses the extraction of resources such as minerals, agriculture production, and labor from the peripheries for the benefit of European economies. This economic exploitation contributed to the wealth and development of European centers, while often perpetuating poverty and underdevelopment in the other peripheries. Now, this chapter also delves into the establishment of trade networks between Europe and non European regions. It explores the ways in which trade, both through direct exchange and long distance networks, facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, and cultural practices between the centers of European countries and the colonialized countries. Power dynamics are a central theme in this chapter. Wolff discusses how European centers exercised political control and imposed their legal, administrative, and military systems on non European peripheries. This resulted in the establishment of colonial regimes, the displacement of indigenous political structures, and the imposition of European cultural norms and values. Now, colonialism disrupted traditional social structures, economic systems, and political institutions in non European societies, often leading to significant transformations and social dislocation. Wolff highlights the resistance and adaptation strategies employed by indigenous societies in response to European domination. He examines instances of cultural resilience, preservation of local traditions, and the negotiation of power dynamics. Indigenous societies often developed strategies of accommodation, survival, and resistance that followed them to navigate the challenges posed by colonialism. Now, the chapter examines the profound consequences of European colonization on indigenous societies. It explores the displacement and marginalization of indigenous populations, the introduction of diseases that decimated native populations, and the destruction of the traditional social structures and cultural practices, as well as exploitation and subjugation. Furthermore, the chapter explores the social and cultural transformations that occurred in the indigenous societies as a result of the colonial encounter. Wolff discusses the impact of European technologies, agriculture, and the trade networks on indigenous societies, as well as the introduction of new crops, animals, and cultural practices. Now, I'm going to talk about how this book relates to our discussion of perusal. So, the first theme that it's related to is the theme of standardization. The book discusses the impact of European colonialism and the spread of capitalism on non European societies. These processes often involve the imposition of European standards, legal systems, and also cultural norms on indigenous societies, which led to standardization and the erosion of local cultural practices. Now, the author explores how standardization influenced power dynamics and also cultural exchanges during the colonial encounter. The second theme, which is related to perusal, is the theme of connection. This book emphasizes the interconnectedness of societies and the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultural practices between European and non European societies. It examines the connections forged through trade networks, colonialization, and also cultural encounters. Following is the theme of mixing. Europe and the People Without History explores this theme, this mixing of cultures, ideas, and practices that occurred during the colonial encounter. It examines how European and non European societies influence each other through cultural exchange, hybridity, and the blending of traditions. The book highlights the transformative effects of cultural mixing and the formation of new cultural synthesis. And last but not least, risk and vulnerability. While the book does not explicitly focus on the concept of risk and vulnerability, it touches upon the vulnerabilities faced by non European societies in the face of European colonization. The book examines how indigenous populations were often exposed to diseases, dispossessions of land, and exploitation, resulting in increased vulnerability and adverse consequences. That is it for my book review. Thank you for listening.